It was a cold evening in the lonely mountains of Arizona. The air was so sharp that even breathing felt heavy. Mark Dalton, a 35-year-old wildlife photographer, was driving through the rocky desert trail when his old Jeep suddenly stopped. The engine coughed, rattled, and then went completely silent. He tried again, but it wouldn't start. When he checked his phone, there was no signal. The nearest town was almost 50 miles away, and the sun had already disappeared behind the red hills. Mark sighed. He knew spending the night there was his only choice. He set up a small tent near the base of a large rock and gathered some dry branches for a fire. The desert looked peaceful but empty, and as the wind grew stronger, he pulled his jacket tighter around him. He had spent years traveling to remote places for his work, photographing rare animals and untouched landscapes, but tonight felt different. Too quiet, almost lonely. He finally lit the campfire and began heating water for tea. The orange flames flickered across the stones, giving a bit of comfort against the freezing wind. As he sat beside the fire, his mind wandered to his next photography project, capturing images of ancient Apache land. He had been fascinated by the tribe's deep respect for nature, but he also knew how easily outsiders could misunderstand their traditions. He hoped to photograph their sacred lands respectfully, showing beauty without harm. Just as he took a sip of tea, he thought he saw something move in the darkness beyond the light of the fire. It was faint, like a shadow gliding between the rocks. He froze for a moment, listening carefully. The desert was silent except for the sound of the wind brushing through the cacti. Then he saw it again, a small figure slowly stepping out from behind a rock. It was a young girl. She looked no older than 20, with long black hair that fell across her shoulders. She wore a thin blanket around her body and simple moccasins on her feet. Her face was pale from the cold, and her eyes carried a strange mix of fear and calm. Mark stood up quickly, unsure what to do. "Hey there," he said softly. "Are you okay?" The girl nodded slowly. Her voice was quiet but clear when she spoke. "I just need to warm up, please." Without thinking twice, Mark moved aside and gestured toward the fire. "Of course, sit down. You must be freezing." She came closer and sat near the flames, holding out her hands to the warmth. The firelight revealed her face more clearly now. Delicate features, deep brown eyes, and a small necklace made of beads and feathers. She looked like she belonged to one of the nearby Apache communities. Mark poured her a cup of hot tea and handed it to her. "Here, this might help." She accepted it with a shy smile. "Thank you." For a while, they both sat quietly. The fire crackled, and the night sky above them glittered with thousands of stars. After some time, Mark tried to start a friendly conversation. "So, what are you doing out here this late? It's dangerous to be alone at night." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on the fire. Finally, she said softly, "Sometimes the mountains call you back, even when you don't plan it." Mark wasn't sure what she meant. He thought she might be speaking in a poetic way, maybe about family or memories. "That's interesting," he said with a smile. "I came here for work, actually. I'm a photographer. I'm trying to capture this land before people change it too much." The girl looked at him for the first time. "The land remembers everything," she said in a serious tone. "It doesn't forget." Her words made Mark pause. There was something heavy in the way she said them, as if she was warning him about something. But before he could ask, she pulled the blanket tighter around her and looked away. He didn't want to press her with questions, so he changed the topic. "You can stay in my tent tonight if you want. It's too cold to sleep outside." She hesitated, but then nodded. "Thank you. You are kind." As the night went on, she began to tell small stories. Old Apache tales about spirits who guarded the mountains, about how the wind carried the voices of ancestors, and how stars were like eyes watching over the land. Her voice was soft, almost like a song, and it seemed to blend with the sound of the wind. Mark listened carefully. He found himself drawn to her calm and mysterious way of speaking. It was as if she was connected to the land in a way he couldn't understand. When he asked for her name, she said, "Naya." "That's a beautiful name," he said kindly. "Does it mean something?" She smiled faintly. "It means one who is guided by dreams." That made Mark even more curious. "So are you following a dream tonight?" She looked at him with eyes that seemed far older than her face. "Maybe. Sometimes dreams are not just for sleeping." Her answer left him puzzled, but he didn't want to sound rude. He thought she was just speaking in a traditional way, like many elders did in remote tribes. Still, something about her tone made the air feel heavier. After a while, the wind outside grew stronger. The temperature dropped sharply, and Mark suggested they move inside the tent. He set up his sleeping bag and gave her his extra blanket. She thanked him again, her voice so gentle it almost sounded like a whisper. Inside the tent, the sound of the wind echoed like distant whispers. Mark lay awake for a while, thinking about everything she had said. There was something hauntingly peaceful about her presence. She didn't talk much, but when she did, every word felt meaningful. At one point, he heard her say softly, almost to herself, "Some things must be returned before the dawn." Mark turned slightly toward her. "What do you mean?" he asked, but she didn't reply. She was staring quietly at the small opening of the tent, watching the shadows move in the firelight. He thought she might just be tired or dreaming, so he didn't ask again. Soon, the silence took over, and the fire outside faded into glowing embers. Mark finally drifted to sleep, listening to the wind as it swept across the mountains. He dreamed of the desert, of eagles flying over red cliffs, of rivers running through canyons, and of a girl standing on a hill with her arms lifted toward the sky. She looked like Naya, but her figure seemed to glow faintly like moonlight. In the dream, she turned to him and said the same words again, "Before the dawn." When Mark woke up suddenly, the fire had gone out completely, and the first light of morning was peeking through the tent. He looked around, expecting to see Naya sleeping beside the blankets, but the spot was empty. Her blanket was there, folded neatly near the entrance, but she was gone. Mark called her name a few times, stepping outside into the cold morning air, but there was no answer. The desert was silent except for the distant call of a hawk. He walked a few steps toward the rocks, scanning the area. There were no footprints in the sand except his own. It was as if she had vanished without a trace. He felt confused and slightly uneasy. Who was she? Where could she have gone so early in the morning? He didn't remember hearing the tent open or footsteps in the night. The only thing left behind was a faint smell of smoke and something else, something like wild sage. When Mark turned back toward his tent, his eyes caught something lying on his camera bag. It was a small carved amulet, shaped like an eagle's feather, made from stone and decorated with red and white beads. He picked it up carefully. It looked old, handmade, and somehow familiar, almost like something he had seen in one of the sacred sites he planned to photograph. A chill ran down his spine as he remembered Naya's last words. Some things must be returned before the dawn. He didn't understand what she meant yet, but deep inside, he felt that this meeting was not an accident. The desert wind blew softly through the rocks, almost like a whisper. Mark looked at the amulet in his hand and realized this was only the beginning of something far deeper than he could imagine. The morning sun slowly climbed over the red mountains, painting the desert in golden light. Mark stood quietly near his tent, holding the carved amulet in his hand. The small eagle feather glowed faintly in the sunlight, as if it carried its own hidden warmth. He couldn't stop thinking about Naya, the Apache girl who had appeared so suddenly the night before and disappeared just as mysteriously before dawn. He turned the amulet over in his hand again and again. It looked old, maybe ancient. The beads and the tiny carvings were handmade with care, like something that belonged to a sacred tradition. He felt uneasy, not because he was scared, but because something about this felt meaningful, like she had left it on purpose. Mark packed up his camera and equipment, deciding to visit the nearby Apache village before leaving the mountains. He wanted to make sure Naya was safe, and maybe return her amulet if it truly belonged to her. The trail to the village took him through long stretches of dry land and sharp rocks. The sun grew hotter as the morning passed, but he kept walking, thinking about her stories, her quiet voice, and her strange words about returning something before the dawn. After nearly an hour of walking, he reached a small community of wooden houses and stone huts. A few children were playing outside, and elders sat together under a large tree. As Mark approached, he greeted them politely and asked if anyone knew a young woman named Naya. The moment he said her name, the group fell silent. The elder sitting nearest to him slowly looked up. His face was wrinkled, but his eyes were sharp and calm, full of years of wisdom. "Naya," the elder repeated softly. "Where did you see her?" Mark explained everything, how his jeep broke down, how she appeared from the darkness, how they talked by the fire, and how she disappeared before sunrise. He held out the amulet carefully, showing it to them. She left this behind. I thought it might belong to her. The elder's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the amulet. He studied it for a long time before speaking. This belongs to our tribe. It was lost a long time ago. You said she gave this to you? She didn't exactly give it, Mark said. I just found it beside my bag this morning. I thought she might have dropped it. The elder exchanged glances with the others before turning back to Mark. You are sure it was Naya? Yes, Mark replied. She said her name was Naya. Long black hair, kind eyes. She said the mountains called her back. The elder sighed deeply and looked toward the distant hills. My son, he said gently. Naya was real. But she left this world many winters ago. Mark frowned, confused. What do you mean? The elder's voice was soft but heavy with emotion. She was one of our daughters. Many years ago she was guarding sacred carvings near the Eagle Rock, symbols of our ancestors. One night a storm came and she never returned. We found her footprints near the cliff but never her body. We believed her spirit stayed in these mountains, protecting what was taken from our land. Mark felt his heart race. He didn't know what to say. You mean, she's gone? But I saw her. I talked to her. She was real. The elder nodded slowly. Sometimes when hearts are pure, spirits show themselves to those who listen. Maybe she saw something in you, a truth, a purpose. Mark felt a strange shiver run through him. He looked again at the amulet in his hand. Suddenly Naya's words echoed in his mind. Some things must be returned before the dawn. The elder continued. That amulet was taken from one of our sacred sites years ago by travelers who did not understand its meaning. Perhaps you photographed something connected to it. Mark thought for a moment, then realized the truth. A few days earlier he had found a hidden cave while exploring the canyon. Inside he had taken photos of beautiful ancient carvings, eagles, rivers, and sun symbols etched into stone. He hadn't touched anything, but maybe his camera had captured something sacred, something Naya was protecting. He looked at the elder and said quietly, I think I know what she wanted me to return. The elder smiled kindly. Then go back, my friend. Return it to the place where you saw those carvings. Speak to her spirit with respect. The mountains will listen. Mark thanked him and began his journey back toward the mountains. The path was long and silent. As he walked, memories from the night before filled his mind. The way Naya's voice blended with the wind. The way her eyes seemed to hold both sadness and peace. He now understood that her visit was not just chance. She had come to remind him that the land was alive, that every stone, every breeze carried history. When he reached the cave, the air felt cooler, almost sacred. The carvings on the wall seemed to shimmer in the sunlight filtering through the rocks. He stood there quietly, holding the amulet in his hands. He took a deep breath and spoke softly as if Naya could hear him. I didn't mean to disturb anything. I came here to show the world your people's beauty, not to take what belongs to you. I think this is what you wanted back. He walked to a flat stone near the center of the cave and placed the amulet there carefully. For a moment nothing happened. Then a gentle wind passed through the cave, swirling softly around him. It wasn't cold. It felt warm and peaceful, like a sigh of relief. Mark smiled slightly. Thank you, Naya, he whispered, for trusting me. As he turned to leave, he noticed something shining faintly on the wall, a reflection of light forming the shape of a feather. It lasted only a second before fading away, but Mark knew what it meant. She was at peace. When he finally returned to his Jeep, he found it working perfectly, even though he hadn't touched the engine since last night. It started with one turn of the key. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't try to. Some things, he realized, were meant to stay as mysteries. Weeks later, Mark published his story and photographs in a travel magazine, but this time he did it differently. Instead of focusing on adventure or beauty, he wrote about respect, about how the land remembers everything and how every culture carries stories worth protecting. He mentioned Naya, though not as a ghost or legend, but as a guardian of her people's truth. The story touched many hearts. Readers from around the world wrote letters saying it changed how they viewed nature and history. But for Mark, the greatest change was inside himself. He no longer traveled just to take pictures. He traveled to listen, to learn, and to honor the voices of the places he visited. Every year after that, he returned to the Arizona mountains. He would sit by the same rocks where his Jeep had once broken down, light a small fire, and watch the stars. Sometimes, when the wind moved softly through the desert, he could almost hear her voice again, gentle, calm, and filled with peace. He would smile and whisper into the night, "I kept my promise, Naya." And though no one else could see her, Mark always felt she was near, watching over the land, guiding the wind, and reminding him that kindness and respect never fade, not even between two worlds. That cold night had changed his life forever. He had come to the mountains as a traveler searching for a story, but he left as a man who understood something far greater, that every heart, every piece of land, and every forgotten soul has its own story waiting to be told, if only someone takes the time to listen. And so, in the quiet of the desert beneath the endless stars, a promise between a man and a spirit remained, unseen, unspoken, but everlasting.